Good evening, everyone, and welcome to When I Was Your Age, a vlogcast that talks about common stuff today and what it was like when I was your age. If you have comments and suggestions, please feel free to rate and comment on this video. If you'd like to contact me via email, please, of course, feel free. The address is right here on the screen, shujintribble@gmail.com. Item number one, first off, yes, I've been away for a while. I apologize. Things have not turned out the way that I wanted them to. There's a long story, and I'll explain it all another time. Item number two, yes, I know. The video is exceedingly dark right now. I apologize. My normal fill light is busted. This is what happens. Halogen bulbs every once in a while go out. But you know what? The content is far more important than looking at me, so let's get right on to it. Episode number 9, head-to-head gaming. Now, of course, a lot of us are full well familiar with the current editions of how this stuff works. For instance, you've got Xbox Live, which first came onto the market in 2002, the end of 2002. Of course, the PlayStation Network, you needed an adapter for the PlayStation 2, which was what it was originally designed for, but the PS3 came out in 2006. Integrated networking was already built into it, so you had that going for you. And of course, we have the Nintendo Network, which has just started up. Now, that's kind of been rolled into the whole Wi-Fi so that you can use DS and Wii along with the Wii U, the 3DS, the 2DS, which I think is just a joke, but, whatever. And, of course, that came out last year in 2012. However, there are a couple of marketing items that came through over the years back when I was younger. And some of you are going to recognize a couple of these. Some of you are going to wince at the thoughts of some of them. Some of you are going to go, really? They tried that? For instance, what you got here is the logo and a picture of the product that came out in 1990. The Sega MegaNet, also known as the Network System, online service for the Mega Drive in Japan for Sega. It used dial-up internet access. It was the first online multiplayer game system for Sega. And you were able to pay bills, pay to play, actually, is what it came down to. It worked with the Mega Modem, which is the picture that you see here on the screen. And you had several titles that were specifically able to be downloaded. Of course, you were able to compete head-to-head with somebody via the telephone line, which had worked, sometimes didn't exactly, but we'll come back to that in a second because that's a technological thing. After that, you've also got the Sega Channel, which was an online game service developed by Sega for the Sega Genesis game console, and they had content delivery this way also, kind of the same way that a lot of the modern ones do now. It started in 93 and was brought to you by Time Warner Cable and TCI Cable. So you had faster speed systems. You still needed specialized equipment, but, you still had it available to you. Now, for Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, you had a new modem system, and this was kind of unique. I take that back. Well, apparently the plows are going back through here in the Buffalo region. Imagine that. Snow? Us? Nah. It can't be somewhat unique. It was unique. It was the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo Xband system. Now, some of you are kind of familiar with the Game Genie system, where you had the game console, and then you had the Game Genie cartridge, and then you plugged in your game cartridge on top of that, theoretically allowing you to exploit certain things with the game consoles that you could utilize and cheat, I guess is the best way to put it. Anyway, Xband was an online gaming network system, very unofficial. And it was kind of weird. Came out in 94, 95-ish, and it ran several years. It was a modem. Like I said, it was available at Blockbuster a lot. And at its height, Xband had about 700,000 subscribers. The idea was that you would use Xband along with your gaming cartridge if it was supported it would dial into the Xband systems, the networking system, and it would try to find out, is there someone in your local area that you could play head-to-head against via the phone? And the Xband cartridges would say, okay, we've got you. We've got somebody in your nearby calling area. All right, you're both going to be playing head-to-head on this game. Do you agree? Yes, okay. Both disconnect from the phone lines, and one of them calls the other, and then you would play head-to-head using the phone line as your networking edition. Now, this caused a little bit of a problem because there was also a setting whereby instead of just looking in your local area, you could look outside of your local network dialing area. Now, this caused a little bit of a problem because, you see, there was an additional charge for that, never mind the long-distance fees, and that got charged through Xband. Parents were supposed to take control of this and say, okay, we want to have access to that. We don't want the kids to have access to it. We're going to need a PIN for that. Hey, Johnny, what do you want your PIN to be? No, ma'am. What you want to do is you want a code that only you can access so that you have control over the telephone dialing on the program. Oh, okay. Johnny, what do you want your code to... So then when people got $200 phone bills suddenly, why was it? Well, we've got it here in your notes. You asked the kid twice, and we told you twice, don't do that. That's what happened. Anyway, the networking lag, of course, could be a little annoying at time when you're dealing with long-distance calls. Go fig. But there was also a small problem that was a little annoying, to put it nicely, for the serious gamer or the moderately serious gamer. If a player was losing the match, all they had to do was pull the phone cord or turn off the game console. And then all of a sudden, nobody wins, nobody loses. It's just a push, and nothing gets recorded. And there was no way for Xband to try and figure out, was it a legit drop in networking? Was it somebody rage quitting? Which pissed off people all kinds of left and right who were serious about, leaderboards and that kind of thing. Go fig. After that, you've also got the Sega Saturn Netlink, which is an attachment for the Sega Saturn game console. So you had internet access, email, and it was a 28.8 modem, kilobit per second modem, for those of you that remember such things. It fit into the cartridge port, and it came with a browser, a primitive browser, but a browser nonetheless. And it sold for about $200. Or, if you want to get it with the Sega Genesis system altogether, it was about $400. And to qualify that, by the way, it was 28.8 in the US. However, in Japan, it was 14.4. Why there was a difference, I do not know. But it was there, and it kind of faded, of course. And then came one of the weirder ones. And this is one I really kind of remembered about, kind of didn't remember about. How many of you remember the Nintendo N64? As a matter of fact, I've still got one over in my living room, hooked up to my new television. Well, how many of you remember the Nintendo 64 Double D? And no, I'm not making a cutesy remark about it. That's actually what it was called. It was a peripheral, of course, for the Nintendo 64, and it plugged into the N64 through the expansion port on the bottom. What you see on the screen right now is a top view of the Double D. It allowed the N64 to use a proprietary 64 megabyte magneto-optical disc for data storage. Now, an MO disc is kind of a hybrid between a magnetic disc, kind of like a zip drive or a hard drive, and an optical disc like a CD. So this was a weird thing. It unfortunately did not really work as well as they were hoping for. It got delayed and it had problems. It was originally supposed to come to North America in 2000, and it failed so bad in 99 inside of Japan, it never went anywhere else. Now, if you consider that CD storage at the time had 650 megabytes or more, it didn't really make a lot of sense for 64 megs for such a thing. And if you consider that a lot of the other systems were coming out with CDs as much more standard, it didn't really make a hell lot of sense. So it just fell by the wayside. Considering that Nintendo's cartridges ranged anywhere from 4 to 64 megabytes, the writing was on the wall that way. Now, that was networked stuff. But let's not forget, there were also a couple of other ways of doing it. If you wanted to do a turn-by-turn basis game, there was also something called play by email. And there were some games where you were able to do that with. You think about it, there were a lot of games where you could do that. For instance, if you wanted to play checkers or chess by someone, back in the day, it used to be that you could have a pen pal and actually write an actual letter and say, okay, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to talk about. Okay, by the way, with the game that we're playing, rook to queens 3, or some such bullshit like that. Just let it go. I know, I'm mixing it up, but just humor me a second. But with email, you could also do the same kind of thing. It was faster, of course, because you didn't have the week layover for mail to actually be delivered by the postal service. So email could get to whoever, and you get to it whenever, and you play that way. But of course, for actual live, you also had the MUDs that started at the time, multi-user dungeons, and those started as early as the early 80s via BitNet. Some of you are unfamiliar with BitNet, and that's something that I'm going to have to talk with everybody about another time. Don't worry, we'll make that a future episode sometime. And even before you get to the interconnected educational services, like with BitNet, you also had the local networked bulletin board services. So you had the BBS door games on BBSs, and that doesn't even include the stuff that was running on VAX systems that were written for people to play against each other across the educational network mainframe systems, all based on terminals with either ASCII or ANSI characters on the screen. But back in my day, we had games that you were able to play back and forth, maybe not necessarily as efficiently or as graphically intensive as what are happening now with Xbox and PS, Wii, but we still had our stuff. And I still say, you want to impress the shit out of me? Lock yourself into a room, a dark room, turn off all the lights, and on your giant screen TV with 7.1 stereo sound, hook up the Atari 2600 and play Adventure on level 3, and try not to soil yourself when the black dragon comes up from underneath you and tries to eat you. Of course, that's what passed for fun and back in my day. Thank you all for listening and watching. As I've mentioned before, please feel free to add comments, make suggestions on future shows, like and share the video for anyone that you might think might enjoy it. And of course, many thank yous to George Robb for the use of his song When I Was Your Age. I will talk to you all again real soon. I will hope to have this much more timely for a change. I'm going to see what I can do about doing that for you guys, because I've actually missed doing this. Meantime, of course, as always, I wish you all the peace I no longer have. I wish you the strength that I've learned. I wish you well. Until the next time we get together, everyone.
You know what's true?
Good night.
Before you can say boo, you'll be my age too.